If someone asked you how much you could safely take from your retirement portfolio each year in retirement, what would you say? Now, if 4% comes to mind, it's probably because you've heard it over and over again. The 4% safe withdrawal rate is a very widely known rule of thumb for retirement planning. And yet what most people don't know is that's just a starting point. That's not the final answer. And that distinction can really matter a lot. And I want to talk about the 4% rule, what people miss about it, some gaps that you have to consider in order to have a secure plan, and how you can determine your own safe number for your withdrawals from your portfolio. Let's start by talking about what this 4% rule really is and where it came from. There was a financial advisor by the name of William Bingen wanting to analyze what could his clients withdraw from their retirement portfolios and not run out of money over their retirement lifetime. And he assumed that they would live 30 years in retirement and that they would be invested half in the stock market, the S&P 500 basically, and half in long-term bonds, basically long-term treasuries. And based on that, he determined that 4% was the minimum amount that they could safely withdraw and not run out of money over that period of time, while at the same time keeping up with inflation. What I want you to understand is that that 4% rule gave a starting point. So where a lot of people get into trouble is thinking that the 4% rule is almost like a guarantee. Like if I just take 4% from my retirement assets, then I'm going to be fine. There are some key places where there could be some gaps, and you want to think these through for your own situation. So the first gap could be longevity. The rule was based on a 30-year time horizon. Now, if you retire, say at age 60, and you have longevity in your family, and you're going to live to maybe age 95, that's a 35-year time horizon. Some people are retiring earlier than age 60. Some people have even longer family longevity, and we've got a lot of improvements in health that are coming along that are anticipated to increase our longevity even more, especially for the people that are healthier, that have access to better medical care. So 30 years may not be enough of a time horizon for your particular plan. Another thing that the 4% rule doesn't really address is taxes. It just says you can take 4% each and every year without running out of money. But some of that might be in tax deferred that's never been taxed, and some of that could be in taxable accounts that are taxed as you go, and some could be in tax-free accounts where it comes out with no tax. There's going to be a big difference between the person who has most of their retirement savings in their 401k and IRAs and somebody that has a lot more that's been built up in taxable brokerage accounts. The after-tax amount is going to be vastly different. The person that has most of their savings in the tax-deferred IRA is going to have to pay income tax on the full distribution. So 4% net of, say, 25% income tax means 3% net spendable. You have to take out a lot more in order to get a 4% net amount coming into the household. And so that's another thing that you have to consider. What is your tax picture, and how's that going to impact the amount of spending that you have? Another very important thing is, how is the money invested? Now, the research was based on being invested 50% in the stock market, the S&P 500, and 50% in long-term treasury bonds. Not everybody is invested that way. You may not be invested that way. And so you've got to look at what is your investment mix and how's that going to perform over time in order to know if that's going to really support a 4% withdrawal rate or a higher withdrawal rate or a lower withdrawal rate. I had a couple come into my office who knew that if they got to a certain amount of retirement savings, that they could then withdraw the amount that they needed to cover their bills. They were basing this on the 4% rule. And yet, they wanted to invest much more conservatively. And so if they are going to use the 4% rule and yet be invested where they're only earning 3%, then each and every year they're having to go into the principal to make up the difference between what they're earning on their investments, what that growth is, and the distribution that they're receiving. When we looked at that, then they realized that they need a better way to support the spending so that they don't run out of money later in life or not have enough to keep up with inflation. If you're invested too conservatively, then you're not going to be able to keep up with that distribution rate that you need. But if you're invested too aggressively, then it's possible that you could end up with too much volatility, and that could mess up the amount that you're pulling out of your portfolio. So you want to have the right mix that's going to support both the short-term spending and the long-term growth so that it does what you need it to do, and it can support the withdrawal rate that you need from your portfolio. And then the last thing that this rule doesn't really address is how much is left at the end. The 4% rule says you won't run out of money. It doesn't say you're going to end up with $1 million for each child. And that may be your goal. And so if it is, then you want to make sure that you build that into your plan. Now, the way to come up with your number, the one that works for you, is to put together a plan, run your projections, have it based on what is your age, when are you going to retire, what income is going to be coming in, how much do you need to spend in order to support your lifestyle, to support the other things that you want to do, how are you going to be invested, how are you willing to be invested, do you want to be more conservative, do you want to be more aggressive, and then what ending value do you need, and then stress test it for different levels of inflation and different levels of market volatility, stress test it for living longer, not living as long, so that you know how this plays out over time. That will allow you to come up with your own safe withdrawal rate number that you can feel very confident going into retirement that this number will work for your plan, for the assets you have, for the mix of assets you have, for the taxes you're going to pay, for all of the things that go into your plan. But then once you've done that, you need to revisit it from year to year. You need to come back and look at your numbers, look at the plan, and be ready to make adjustments. If we've had a really good economy, you've had a lot of growth, you maybe haven't spent quite as much, there are a lot of things that could go into the ability to increase how much you're taking from your portfolio. But on the other hand, if, say, we've had some bad years in the market and maybe you've had some extra expenses, then you could adjust downward for a period of time. And by doing this, looking at it from year to year, making little tweaks where you need to, then that will keep you on your best path throughout retirement, not just at the beginning of retirement. And that's what we want. We want you to be on your best path all the way from the beginning of retirement to the end of retirement. If you don't have a plan, if you'd like to put together a plan, then I encourage you to find a good financial advisor that can help you put that together. Someone that has some experience, that can point out the blind spots, that can show you the gaps, that can help you put together a plan that will cover everything that you need it to cover. And if you're wondering how I work with people to put together a plan, then just head over to my website, www.bestpathadvisors.com. And you can check out how I work, and if it seems like a fit, you can schedule a time for a friendly conversation. And if you do, then I look forward to talking to you. Like this video, subscribe to the page so you don't miss anything, and I look forward to seeing you next time right here to help you retire on your best path.